Well, welcome everyone. I'm going to get started. I imagine some other people will be trickling in. My name is Michele Rapp. I'm the Associate Director of Alumni Career Strategy in the Office of Alumni Relations, and I organize diverse career programs, trying to find something for everyone in the topics that I cover. I also do some career coaching with alumni, and I oversee the NUSource networking platform. Thank you for coming today to talk about this important topic, self-advocacy and thinking about negotiation in the workplace. And I think we will be a small enough group so that I do welcome your participation. Feel free to put your camera on if you want. It's okay to eat lunch if you are doing so. But I definitely hope for this to be interactive. So let me get my slides up here. Okay. So just to give you a sense of where we're headed, I do want to get a sense of the kind of topics or asks that you may be encountering in your work life. And we'll be talking about strategies and approaches to being successful. Also some background considerations to take into account. And also I'll give you a chance to do a worksheet to kind of map out your own negotiation or discussion. I do ask that I want to create a space that people can share things. So request that you keep the conversations here confidential. We did record. I'm just going to assess afterwards. Often we post the recording on YouTube, but if it seems like there are things that I think people wouldn't want posted, I'm not going to use the recording at all. So just letting you know that. So just to get us started, I'd be interested to find out from you some of the kinds of things you either want to learn and or the kind of situations that you're asking, wanting to make an ask about. Oh, and thanks, John Lee. I'm glad you're joining us from Vancouver. So what might be some areas that you're wanting to advocate for yourself? And you can add that into the chat. And if there's not a particular ask, yes, staying remote is probably, one of the biggest. Staying remote, yes. Being hybrid, which days you're in and out and all of how that goes has become such a popular and common discussion in the workplace, definitely. So Natalia, reevaluation of job scope, absolutely. That can come up as you advance in a role. It can come up, I just talked to a former colleague where people kept leaving and more work kept piling onto her plate. And that can also be a topic of negotiation, discussion. And anything else, feel free to keep adding topics, and also anything else that you were hoping to take away today. And Victoria, thank you. Upward mobility potential, that's really important conversation to be having. Well, good. These are some things to start with. Feel free to add to the chat. I will ask my colleague Caesar to let me know if I miss anything in the chat. Also, when you think about situations where you've negotiated in the past or had those kind of conversation, and Natalia, you're mentioning that work-life balance, long work hours, changing from a temp to perm is definitely an important conversation. Excellent. When you think about self-advocacy or negotiation that you've had in the past at work. What are some things that you found made you successful? And you can, if it's not something, open communication. Natalia, can you add a little bit more? How did you make that happen? And if you're not, for everyone, if you're not thinking of a success strategy, you can also add things that you learned didn't work well. Yeah, Natalia makes a good point. You know, it's not a one-time thing, and I was just reading something that talked about kind of setting the stage or bringing up certain topics, discussing certain topics before you actually sit down for this conversation, right? So it doesn't have to be a one-time thing. Terry, thank you. Definitely being prepared. We're going to talk about that, and having data to, data or other evidence to support your ask. You can even, in some cases, there might be value to use a little PowerPoint to pull some information together that gives you something to focus on. And Victoria says just letting things sit without engaging in that conversation doesn't work, right? People can't read your mind. We have to think about, if we're talking about negotiation with a boss, they're busy. They're not always thinking about us or who knows what, your people are busy, so they're not always aware of your needs. So it does often take initiating a conversation, and the more we do this, the better it is to get comfortable with it. Excellent, thank you. So here are some things, here are some possible topics that we're talking about here. I think we're all familiar with salary benefits and vacation time, and certainly one of the first negotiations we have at work is when we're getting hired. So that's a critical time, that's setting a stage, very important. We also, once we're working somewhere, and often when we're having a performance review, but it's not limited to performance review, comes the discussion of promotion, advancement. Maybe it's a new job title that would be satisfying to you. And again, as was said, there's a lot of conversations now about remote and work from home, flexibility. One of my favorite topics is having conversations to advocate. So you're trying to develop certain skills, you're trying to advance. And sometimes it's talking to a manager about, I want to develop these skills and I want to work on some projects and or new assignments, more advanced assignments, as well as maybe joining a committee that would help you develop certain skills. And one of the things I like to emphasize is, one way to approach this is to say, I want more responsibility, I want more projects, I want to develop my skills. But my tip is that it's great if you can propose things like, hey, I see this thing happening. I'd like to be on that team. I'd like to lead this effort to improve this process. Here are some things in the organization. There's a team being formed. Could I be on that team? So the more you can come up with ideas and suggestions, I think managers like that. Yes, so dealing with workload, too much work. You may be, I know I was in a situation where I was having ongoing conversations and making my case that I needed administrative help to make the best use of my time with alumni events, for example. Professional development is another great area of conversation. That might be something like asking for a membership to be paid for by the company. It can be asking to attend a conference or attend webinars. Thank you, Victoria. Right, so your company has an attitude of don't just, I think when you bring up an issue, it can seem like complaining, and that's where you want to watch your tone. But the more you can suggest solutions, the better, and that might jumpstart the conversation. You may want to have a discussion about flexibility. You might be dealing with health issues, caregiving, mental health issues. You might be a part-time student and need some flexibility, or just seeking a different kind of work-life balance. Negotiating and asking for resources. It might be equipment to do your job, a new computer, some ergonomic standing desk, better chair, that kind of thing. And if you're in the office, there might be some negotiation about, the place with the corner window, the corner office with the window, or a different desk location for whatever reasons. Is there anything else you'd like to add to this list? Things that might be possible topics of negotiation. Okay, I'm going to move on. So a couple of things that I like to emphasize. Aha, yes, Natalia, you might be having a salary conversation. Now there's a move towards some more salary transparency. So you might have some information about other salaries in your department, or you may have a counter offer and can use that potentially to negotiate for a higher salary for yourself. So a key factor in these kind of conversations and negotiation is knowing your value and owning your value. This can start with a sense of personal brand. So one is for you to really, this is always a good practice, is to think about, what am I good at? What do I want to be known for in the workplace? And how do I become known? And that can also be outside your organization. You may be, I was just talking to someone about making a career change. They were working on a career change, and I suggested that they post on LinkedIn about the topics of employee engagement that they're interested in to show their expertise in that arena. What are some things that you either are known for at work or would like to be known for at work? You can add that to the chat. And when you think about your value, it may be things that you get feedback about. You get regular feedback about, oh, you're so helpful in this way, you're so reliable, your graphic design work is so creative, things like that. So the other thing is to make sure other people know your value. So Victoria, for example, is detail-oriented, answering questions, helping others. Natalia being a resource, navigating systems, connecting people. Excellent. And so something to think about is, how do you make sure other people know about these things? So this is, and some people don't like this, they think it's like selling yourself, but I think of it as just keeping people informed. Keep your manager informed, keep others informed. Use water cooler conversations to let people know what you're working on. How many of you, does anyone keep an accomplishments folder or file or collection? These might be thank yous or so testimonials or things that you've accomplished throughout the year, just keeping a record for yourself. What kind of things are you doing in that aspect? Right, having the thank yous themselves, especially if you're having a hard day, can be really great to look at. Right, emails from clients and team members. One thing I personally find is when I'm doing a performance review, I hardly remember what I was doing 3 months ago, no less the full year back or 6 months. So I really encourage you to keep track of those things. And if you don't remember, well, if I don't remember it, I can be sure that my manager doesn't remember it either. So having that stuff and being able to speak to it is really helpful. The other thing is having relationships is a source of power, up and down and across your organization and also outside your organization. I found that there's always people I can turn to when I'm having a question or when I'm engaging in an self-advocacy. I may want to ask others for help. I may want to get their perspective. So having a network is always a source of power and influence. Just some other things that I think in the background of negotiation and conversations. There's a lot of research in the salary negotiation arena that women often don't ask often enough compared to men, or may not ask for as much. So this is a skill to be learned, and I'm guessing that people from other underrepresented groups may not also be making those kind of asks often enough as well. In fact, you really have nothing to lose by asking. And it's, what you do get is information. So when you ask, one is this idea of getting comfortable with hearing no, like, okay, that's what happened, but now I know something. If you get a no, it'd be great to understand more about it. But then you have some more information and options to make another ask, to strategize, or to do something else. And you might be pleasantly surprised that you get a good response. You may get more than you asked for. That can just be positive. And the more you do this, you build confidence and it gets easier. And you can always practice by, being sort of like assertiveness, or being assertive with friends or family or even coworkers. So some of these things, I've been talking a lot about asks with managers, but you may be making asks of colleagues or clients or people you depend on in other departments. So I want to highlight some things about how to prepare for self-advocacy or an ask. A really key thing is to find that intersection between your needs and their needs. It's not all about you. So it's really important in this whole process is to think of your department, your boss, the organization, this classic what's in it for them. So, it's like too, if you're asking for a salary increase, you're thinking about your mortgage or something like that. But, what's in it for them? So that's really important. And there hopefully is some intersection between your needs and their needs. Obviously, you want to anticipate concerns and objections. No, the budget's down, or we can't be flexible at this time. The company's going through a hard time. So how might you respond to those objections? Another thing is just assessing whoever you're talking to. If it's your manager, what do you know about your manager? What do you know about what they care about? How flexible are they? How flexible is your department or organization? None of which means you can't make an ask. It's just stuff to take into consideration, and that might affect your approach. You may have heard that silence is a powerful tool when doing business negotiations or even salary negotiations. So you can put something out there, but don't babble on if you get uncomfortable. At some point, just stop and let that pause happen, and see what the other party says. Other things to think about, what's your plan B? If you do get a no, What else could possibly work for you? You don't need to offer that right away, but it's useful to not just be hung up on one solution. Another approach could be like, let's say there's concern about you're staying fully remote. You could set a trial period. What if we try this for 3 months and reevaluate at the end of that time? So that can make the other party more comfortable with whatever it is. The other thing is you might get told, no, this is not a good time, but there might be a willingness to revisit the issue. And I think it's useful to push for, well, let's set a time that we're going to revisit this, so you're not just being blown off or avoided on the topic. So make sure to follow up. The other thing I would say is it's important to know when it's time to go, when to leave a situation. I've definitely encountered people that felt undervalued, maybe didn't have a good relationship with a manager, tried for a lot of internal promotion that didn't happen. So, you know, it's really important, and I have seen people that kind of get stuck somewhere and they may have reasons why they can't leave, but it can also get into a negative cycle. And I think it can be very useful to seek out other situations to see what's out there. You know, and you may find what you're looking for somewhere else. Any questions so far?
I do have a question. Not sure
Yes.
whether this is okay. Thank you so much for this. This is really helpful. I actually got 2 questions in general. So
Yes.
for the first question is, I always remember it won't hurt if you want to ask something. But the thing is, when I actually try, I feel like the approach is really important, and I will think too much, and then I feel like it actually hurts. Like say, if you ask for something and then the manager refuses, then I feel like it will fall into a pattern. Like then the next time, if you want to ask another thing, he or she kind of knows like, okay, she or he can easily refuse you. So yeah, so this is one thing. Another thing is, it's like if you really, well, not really, like if you corner your manager, then you will make your relationship really intense.
Yes.
So like that's how like I feel like it won't hurt if you ask. It's not like that true. So I don't know.
Yes.
I don't really know how to do that. That's the first question. And the other question is, in terms of like, say, ask for a raise, not sure whether it is okay to mention things like besides performance. Like say like the inflation is rising up, right? And it's pretty expensive to buy a house or things like that. Is it okay to mention those things? Yeah,
right.
that's my question.
Excellent. You know, other people are welcome to chime in too with some things. You know, typically with salary negotiation, it's recommended to keep it away from like personal concerns. You know, I'm trying to buy a house, like it's sort of it may not really be it's like that's not sort of the point in a way, like because there could be lots of different reasons for the money, but you're trying to keep it focused generally on your contribution, your performance, your advancement. I will say, I think in my mind, because inflation is a big topic right now, I think that it's something that you could discuss, like, you know, how is the company taking the current inflation rate into account? Because some companies tend to do like a cost of living increase, and it jumped very much this year. So I think that that's, you know, useful to bring up and just say, right, so you're not sort of arguing about your personal needs, but you could also talk about, you know, inflation is a concern right now. You know, how is the company, how might that get addressed salary-wise? is anything else possible? So that's one possibility. I'm just going to take a look at what Victoria has posted here. Okay, I will come back to that. I do understand what you're saying about like concern about creating a negative pattern with a manager. I think that, you know, you raise a good point too, and I'm going to say something too about you always want to keep sort of a friendly win-win attitude about the interaction. You know, even if you've gotten a no, you might say, well, I appreciate your willingness to talk about this issue. You know, leave room for the other party to say things. But I guess just saying thank you, or, you know, how you might follow up or what you learned. So just trying to keep it a conversation. And there may be aspects about, you know, trying to figure out, you know, it depends. Some of us have weekly meetings with our managers, so sometimes there's more opportunity. A lot of times it can be helpful if you don't have those regular meetings to say, you know, I'd like to discuss, I have some career issues I'd like to discuss with you. Could we set a time for that so that they're not taken by surprise? That can be helpful. And, you know, the other part of this is I do feel like, and this comes up in salary negotiation, I feel like if someone asks for more money when they're negotiating an offer, it shows that they value themselves. I mean, you don't want to have something, you know, I want 100,000 more, something unrealistic, but it does show you value yourself. And especially if you're in a field where you might be doing a lot of negotiation, it shows your skill or your confidence. So, you know, it shouldn't be bad to ask unless you create a negative environment about it. You know, sometimes it is possible. In some organizations, people may have had a manager where it's been an ongoing challenge to get anywhere with the negotiations. Some people feel like it's useful to have a conversation with their human resources contact, and other times people don't feel like they want to do that, but that's to know that's an option. Victoria, with the question you're asking about salary negotiation when you've already taken on a lot of work, you know, it is, I know that I was just talking to a colleague where she's been taking on jobs after people left. So it is reasonable to discuss the salary negotiation and say, you know, I'm now doing the work of 1.5 people or 2 people, you know, and I'd like to discuss that. I don't think it necessarily opens the door to having more work loaded on you, because you're talking about the work that's been already added to your load. So I think it's still worth asking for regarding the present workload. You know, and or sometimes it's also renegotiating. Like there's something later in the slides where someone talked about, you know, trying to set boundaries at work, or if your workload has been increased, you may want to have a conversation about, like, here's all the stuff on my plate. This was maybe not part of my original job. My workload has grown. You know, is there someone who could even help take some of this off my plate? Or what's the work that's most relevant to your skill set? You know, is there a way to get help with some other aspect of it? So those are things, you know, and sometimes that's why it's useful to have these conversations, hopefully. And, you know, don't go it alone. I've always found it's helpful, one, to talk to trusted people in your circles, whether it's a friend, a professional colleague, a mentor. So, you know, getting input and different perspectives from people is helpful, especially if it's someone you think is good at negotiation. There may be within your organization allies or mentors or a sponsor who is someone that might be playing an active role in helping your advancement. you may want to meet other people in the organization and asking people, like, could you make an introduction for me? Because talking to people in another department might help your career advancement. And it's always good to build networks outside your company in your profession, or there could be other, sometimes you're part of professional associations, or even community work is part of your network. And it's always really good to have other people too. I've definitely done this with some colleagues to, what do you think about this? How would you see this conversation? What else would you think about? Yes, Victoria, talking to people at a competing firm. Yeah, just to see what's going on in the field. I've also seen people sometimes, I think someone mentioned data earlier, sometimes you do some research. I've seen people regarding salary, do some research through some of the different salary websites or through talking to people and just saying, this is what I'm finding, could I have an assessment done of my pay grade just to make sure it's competitive with the market. And talking to people at competing firms, how do they handle raises, things like that, or advancement? And that comes to that idea again of sometimes you have to look externally and consider leaving if you feel like you're regularly not able to make some change that works for you. Some other things to think about is the timing of when you have these conversations. A good time is when you've had some successes and maybe there's some of that visibility or recognition is recent, because then you're kind of building on that success and visibility. The other thing about timing is don't assume that because it's a typical economic time or whatever, I mean, the company may still be really satisfied with your performance. So that one is a little hard to know. Even at times when there may be layoffs or things, there are some people, if you're really good at what you do, you may still have some negotiation power and, it may be fine to ask. Again, keeping the whole thing friendly, this has to work for both of us, just this kind of, hey, how can we make this work? What do you think is possible? And then listening, we're always so like, I have to worry about what I'm saying, how I say it. But then it's really important in any negotiation is to listen, ask questions, hopefully open-ended questions. You can acknowledge, so, I understand that your concern is equity to other people in our work group. Any thoughts on how this could work? So definitely listening, and really it's important, maybe whoever you're talking to has concerns that you didn't think about. So you could acknowledge that. One of my favorite negotiation concepts is this idea, feel free to post in the chat if you're familiar with this idea of interest versus positions. There's a book that I'll list later called Getting to Yes that popularized this idea. And the distinction here is you might have a position, like was mentioned earlier, I want to continue to work remotely full-time. So that's a position. But below that position is interest that you have below that. Like, who knows what it might be? It might be, I like working from home, it's quieter, I get more done. It might be not wasting time on a commute and the cost of a commute. It may be some caregiving that you're doing in the present where you would benefit from having that time. So sometimes when you dig deeper, you might uncover more possibilities. So all those different ideas might lead to more than one solution versus just being focused on, I need to work remotely 5 days a week. So hopefully you can see how that can be helpful to, sometimes you really want to generate more possibilities for the situation. And we were talking about tone and body language, it's you don't want to come off as really angry. Defensiveness is not great. You don't want to make someone else defensive. And also, you're trying to read body language when you're talking to someone, like, are they folding their arms? Or do they seem to be stressed? So just taking all of that into account. Any other questions or situations that you want to add? Yes, Jun.
Thank you, Michelle. Yeah, so my question is more related to asking for possibility to change from temp to perm position.
Mm-hmm.
So it's because I not recently, but then relocated to an area, and then finding that I would like to develop my career here. Then I love the job that I'm doing. However, of course, a lot of cases enter as a temp, so it's on contracts and looking at how I can, settle and then to develop a more of a career feel and then being a permanent position. So a couple of the times that when I brought it up, it's more of I was told that it's the budget because it's big organization, and then the budget would be part of the reason. I mean, the biggest reason. That all that I was told that is the budget. Not saying that, oh, I'm not willing to, but it's more of, oh, that is a budget. I have to talk to my bosses, and it is more of a fiscal year, So I understand, but how I can continue to, send out a message. I know that maybe the big bosses that they got it, but what is a more appropriate way to give them a, nudge, not push, but then just let them know, hey, I'm here. I am very willing to stay longer if any chances that happen. So all the time that I would brought it up regularly, but I would like to still see, what is the best strategy to go with it, and does it work? If I say I would look for some other opportunities that is also opening up a permanent position, but is in a different organization. So does that help with building the rapport relations, professional relations, if I'm ready to say, hey, if you don't give me this, I will do that, right? I don't want that situation, but I want to have some, cards in my hand, but then it's how can I better play with it, or I'm looking for your suggestion here. Maybe it's for later, but then this is my biggest, question for today. Thank you.
A helpful example, and you started the conversation, which is important. I want to invite others to make some suggestions here. You're welcome to use the chat or to raise your hand. Well, let me add, so one thing I would say, while you're in this role, I would talk to people, just be known to people. Sometimes when you're a temp, people do or don't engage that way. So you want to kind of be engaged there. The other thing is sometimes offering to, you may see other projects or things to work on that you want to ask to be involved with, so that you keep increasing your value and get to know people, talk to people, meet people in other departments. I would apply if there's other jobs in the company. You could definitely apply for them. And then, it may be at some point, it may make sense. The good news is you hopefully are developing some skills, and that's on your resume. I think it could be useful to apply to some things outside, or you could potentially set, it's up to you. You could wait until something else comes up. If you decide you really like that company, then you have an offer that you can use for negotiation. Sometimes people do take people for granted, and maybe need that extra push. And at some point you may feel better investigating other opportunities, and you can decide, do I want that new opportunity, or do I use that, might I use that in a friendly negotiation, like, okay, you know, it might push the issue. So those would be some thoughts. Great. Right, when is the next time the budget will be reviewed? Right, so it is asking for, right, I like that approach too. You're asking for a specific time frame, you know, or what needs to happen. So it's not just whenever or never. So I think that would be great. You could also ask, you know, when would be a good time for us to revisit this? And then you, again, the nice thing when you ask these questions is you get more information. Thank you. So now I want to have you do a little reflection and thinking about one of your own situations. So I'd like to ask you to take a few minutes to use these questions here to you know, jot down some answers to these questions, and then we'll have a discussion about it. And thank you, Christine, who's calling us from Geneva, Switzerland, which is great. So we've got at least 2 international people here. Continue to take advantage of your growth mindset, and keep a diary of your accomplishments, maybe these conversations. Thank you. Okay, so let's start with just taking a few minutes, and then I'll welcome people sharing some of the examples that they have, and what their approach is. And feel free to post any questions that come up, or if you have any questions, you can add that to the chat. Also, if you can post to the chat when you finish, so I'll just have a rough idea where people are. take one more minute. However far you get will be fine. Well, let's come back together however far you got with that. And I wanted to see either insights that you had going through this exercise, as well as questions or dilemmas. Feel free to use the chat or raise your hand. Or does anyone want to give a snapshot of what they came up with? Okay, and Victoria too, these questions definitely feel, they're sort of meant to be prompts, but you don't have to definitely answer all of them. And again, as was mentioned, just that focus on your own accomplishments and impact and value is really helpful.
I can share some thoughts. In terms of the insights, I think this is a really good framework to organize the whole thoughts, especially like say I want to ask for something. I don't really think about like what if I don't get what I'm looking for, and the questions or dilemmas will be the same. Like actually, like for my from my own perspective, sometimes it's hard to think about like other solutions. Like
yes.
what I can really answer is like how can I address their concerns or objections, and also like what if I don't get what I'm looking for. I guess this would be something I could work on with say my friends, like a mentor or other people to help me with. Yeah, so yeah, that's pretty much what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, and that is when when it's just so helpful, because people, I've had that experience where someone says, well, what about this, or why don't you talk to HR, or talk to someone outside the organization. So all of those things, be great. Well, what if you tried it this way? So it's just a little crowdsourcing of solutions, because I think it's helpful in preparing so that you're, if you can't think of it, maybe someone else has an idea that you hadn't thought of. Thank you. Anything that was difficult that you want to ask about? Well, let me share a few more things, but feel free to add to the chat. There was another group that I submitted these tips that was a pre-work for a similar workshop. So here are, I thought these are really encouraging tips. Some of it's about having a positive mindset, giving yourself a pep talk, thinking positively about this and the value of speaking up and giving it a shot. And also planning. So I just wanted to share those. And just a couple of resources. So we have a fabulous alumna, Ashley Perret, who has focused her expertise on salary negotiation, and particularly for women, and advancing career advancement for women, and speaking up. Yes, thank you, Christine. Her business is called ownyourworth.com. You may want to check that out. There's a book called Ask How to Get What You Want and Need at Work. It's an older book from 2002, but I know the woman, she's a Boston career coach, and she really even is the one that suggested you might even do a little PowerPoint presentation of something, depending what you're asking for. Getting to Yes is that book I mentioned. It's also an older book, but it's considered a classic in negotiation. And, I have found, like, I think Google I hate to send you back to Google, but sometimes looking at particular topics like negotiating temp to perm is something I would look up. So sometimes there are things about your particular negotiation issue that you can find. There's a lot of career resources about that as well. And whenever I talk about salary negotiation or negotiation, I like to remember my dad would walk around always saying everything is negotiable, although I realized that I don't think he meant for us to negotiate things that we didn't want to do that my parents wanted us to do. But anyway, I guess I always come back to that when I'm thinking about this topic. I really appreciate all of your coming today. Anything else that we haven't covered? And I will send out those preparation questions to all of you so that you have that. I can send the slides as well. Thank you all for coming. I'm always interested if you have other ideas of topics you'd like to see addressed, or even industry networking fields of interest. Feel free to let me know. I'm just going to put my email in there. And thank you all for sharing some of your situations and for participating. Excellent. All right, we look forward to seeing you at future events. Thank you very much.